Hey folks, today we are going to cover chapter 10 and actually cover some of the points as you're reading and reviewing your material that you should be focused on. But before I do that, as I mentioned, we're at the home stretch. So that means your final exam, which will be at the ending of the month, a couple of weeks, will cover the remaining chapters. It will be in the same format, essay questions covering the remaining chapters. It's coming up in around 2 weeks, the ending of the month. And also, two other things. There is no signature assignment for this class because of the pandemic. Usually this class requires a signature assignment, and we don't have one that's due because we had to remove everything and put it online. 100% online. So there is no signature assignment. Sorry, I can't speak. And also, I will have your second exam that everyone turned in. I will have your grades by next week. So those are the three things. Your final will cover the remaining chapters. That's coming up in a couple of weeks. There is no signature signature paper that's due or signature assignment that's due because of the pandemic. The university has waived that. Usually this class requires a signature paper. And also your exams that you just did will be graded halfway through. Well, maybe a third through. So all of them will be graded by next week. I think that's it. As usual, any questions, please email me at jackie@valleyprojects.com. A lot of you have been communicating with me regularly, so just keep doing that with any questions as you're going through anything. Anyway, okay, so chapter 10, as you're reading it, please look at and analyze civil law and policy issues that are related to it, the elements and causes of crime, the concepts, and when we say due process, exactly what does that mean? Punishment and rehabilitation policies, and apply all of that to due process. Okay. Criminal cases are prosecuted by public officials, and civil cases, you get usually relief by either compensation, which means money, or damages. So that's the difference between the criminal and the civil. There are several types of law. And for instance, there's family law, real estate law, probate law. Some of you guys, as you're in law school and trying to figure out which type of law you're actually going to be focused on, those are just some of the types of laws that are present. In the States today, a large part of our laws are based on English, Old English, based on common law. That's why it's called common law. And it's based on precedents, meaning if there have been lawsuits that have been filed and any kind of decisions have been made, that is a precedent. When you have a new lawsuit, you look at what's been done in the past. A civil law or civil law, types of civil law, business regulations, corporate law, contract law, torts, those all fall under the category of civil law. And a civil wrong is intentional or negligent and results in the injury of another person. So you will hear a lot of people when they're talking about civil law, they'll also talk about tort reform. And that's actually the effort to limit liability in civil cases. So when we're talking about crimes, there are different elements involved. They can be either a felony, which is the highest level, a misdemeanor, or a victimless crime. Briefly, a felony is the most serious and is punishable by state institutions, i.e. prison. Misdemeanors are private crimes and they're punishable by county jail or sentenced with a fine. Victimless crimes are crimes where the criminals themselves are victims. And a lot of people will use illegal drug use as an example. You have a chart in your textbook, and it talks about crime and the penal code in Texas. For instance, if it's capital murder, you'll have execution or life sentence. That would be the terms. So in other words, it has the offense, which would be the capital murder. Then it talks about what that means, and then it talks about terms. This is very important when you're talking about crime, so you understand under our penal code, which is our criminal code, what typical punishments would be assigned for what type of crime. Punishments can be reduced for murder committed if it's done in a sudden passion. And a lot of this is done on the basis of all the evidence that's produced. A lot of people feel that criminal behavior often occurs whenever social values are placed on them. For example, there is a disproportionate number of young, poor, and members of color and certain minority groups that fall into the criminal or accused of criminal or either found guilty of crimes. It's disproportionate to the population. So a lot of social scientists will say, why is that? Well, if, for instance, you see that there are more people of color, and then these people of color fall in a certain socioeconomic level, then it makes sense, according to certain social scientists, that they would commit more crimes. So crimes used as a national barometer of the crime rate means murder, non-negligent manslaughter, burglary, grand theft. All of these are covered in the FBI index crimes. Let me repeat that. FBI index crimes are crimes used as a national barometer for the crime rate. Other factors that contribute to higher crimes would be drug addiction, access to drugs, and urban life. So other characteristics that we've seen, social scientists have seen, that contribute to a higher ratio or percentage of being accused of criminal activity: urban life, drug addiction, and access to weapons. Due process. Proper procedures assigned to promote justice and protect all of us from the government have to happen. For instance, when you are arrested, the Miranda warning has to be told or read to you. That's called due process. There are certain procedures and steps. Every individual, no matter what, certain rights that they are allowed to have in protection until proven guilty. An arraignment. That is when a person who is already in prison, that's your first initial appearance before a magistrate, and they explain the charges and your basic rights. All of that is explained and happens during the arraignment process. Bail is the security deposit that's required for the release. And the magistrate or a judge will say, you are granted bail. And they're the ones who will determine the amount. And it is a security deposit for the release of the suspect. True bill or no bill. So Evidence is taken to a panel of people, and they are called a grand jury. And they will hear all of the evidence that is presented against the person. And then the grand jury will have a finding of true bill or no bill. Either there is sufficient evidence to move forward with the trial, or there is not sufficient evidence to move forward with the trial. So the right to grand jury indictment is guaranteed under both the Texas and federal courts. It protects the rights of us. We are all innocent until proven guilty. It also determines if there is enough evidence. If there is, the grand jury will return with a true bill approving an indictment. A lot of times, a lot of cases will end up in a plea bargaining, which is a secret bargaining session with the prosecutor. So, plea bargaining happens a lot more than people realize. If you do proceed to a trial, then you'll have a trial, then you'll have a jury charge, then you'll have a verdict, then you'll have the sentence, and then possibility of probation. Those are the steps. All of this comes under due process. The trial, the jury charge, the verdict, the sentence, and then probation. Double jeopardy. There is no double jeopardy allowed, meaning you cannot be tried for the exact same crime twice. We see a lot of juvenile offenders. Juvenile offenders are children or people who are not adults, but sometimes they are tried as adults. That's if they commit high or very serious crimes. And usually, young people who have been tried as adults are more likely to commit future crimes than those who are dealt with in the juvenile system. Texas allows children to be tried as young as 14, depending on how serious the crime is. There are 3 types of clemency, but before I get to that, let's talk about the punishment and rehabilitation policies. After an initial stay in prison, prisoners serve the remainder of their sentences under supervised or supervision in the community. That is called parole. So parole happens after an initial stay in prison, and it's under some type of supervised premise or supervision, either in the community, there's someone you visit, there's certain hours you have to commit, maybe of community service. And then that is all encompassed or included in parole. There are 3 types of clemency, which is another word for pardons. You can pardon someone. That means to absolve any citizen from legal consequences. So you are absolved. We see a lot of times we hear that presidents will grant clemency. Well, so can Governor Abbott. You can also reduce a punishment, make the punishment smaller. Let's see. Death penalty. In Texas, as you know, we have the death penalty here. A lot of death penalty supporters contend that capital punishment is a deterrent. In other words, if you know you're in a death penalty state like Texas, I believe we're number 1 by far. At first, number 2 was sort of close, but we are by far number 1. People will be more deterrent or hesitant to commit a crime than if they lived in a state that did not have the death penalty. Those are the people who are supporters of the death penalty. Critics argue that capital punishment is not a deterrent, and states, and they use, of course, some states with capital punishment have even higher murder rates and very serious criminal rates. Usually with the death penalty, it's a lethal injection on a gurney. We as in Texas, were the first state to use lethal injection in executions. And now a lot of people are saying it's excruciating. So lethal injections does not, we were sued many times because we said it was unusual punishment, it was too cruel. But the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that it is not. Lethal injection is not undue, unjust, or not too cruel. So that is your chapter on law and criminal offenses. Again, 10, 11, and 12 are going to be the chapters that your final will cover. And I am grading your second exam, but your final will be the same format as you've seen for your first two exams. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to email me at jackie@valleyprojects.com. And I believe, one last thing. With Thanksgiving coming around, I will probably just give announcements on Blackboard because I know a lot of you are traveling. So we won't have a video next week. I'll just make sure that anything to remind you of or let you know, I will post on Blackboard as usual. So I hope everyone has a very safe and happy Thanksgiving. And as usual, don't hesitate to contact me on jackie@valleyprojects.com. Thanks, guys. Bye.